Shalom, Yashala, Shalom. First and foremost, I want to give all praise, honor, and glory to the Most High Yahweh. I do so in the name of His only begotten Son, Yahweh Shai. Double honors to the apostles and the elders of Yasharallah. Kol Haloyim Yahweh, Bahashem Yahweh Shai, Bahashem Harakah Kodash, for blessing our elders with the spirit of truth, so that we may know. Shout out to the Akim and the Akwak that's keeping the faith in the works. Y'all keep at it. This your brother Abaya coming at you with more precepts. This the book of Psalms, chapter 37 and verse 12. It says, "The wicked plotteth against the just, and gnasheth upon him with his teeth." All right, a part of the curses that we endure in this prison is we constantly oppressed and constantly plotted on by the wicked. All right, it's a constant thing. It never ends, man. All right, always plotting on ways to do us harm. All right, and they proceed to do so. But Scripture says this. This is the book of Deuteronomy, chapter 30 and verse 7. It says, "And Yahweh thy power will put all these curses upon thine enemies, and on them that hate thee, which persecuted thee." So the same things that these devils have done to us, with the exception of the wickedness, the Most High is going to do to them. Right? And one of the things that this devil created was Planned Parenthood, and it was to destroy us. I know I've made recent videos on Planned Parenthood, but I spoke about a thing and I want to prove it. The origins of Planned Parenthood. It stems from eugenics. Eugenics goes as far back as really Egypt, for real. When you go into the scriptures and you hear about the Egyptians wanting to slay the Israelite babies, the males in particular, to keep us from growing. But this particular video says that it goes back to Greece. But if you read the scriptures, you see Egypt, Greece, same thing happening both times. So I'm gonna read this precept from 2 Maccabees, chapter 6, and verse 6. Now this particular instance was speaking about Greece and how it was unlawful for us to call ourselves Jews, but in Egypt it was more so on some pure D hatred. But being put to death for who you are is being put to death for who you are. All right, so 2 Maccabees chapter 6 verse 6 says, "Neither was it lawful for a man to keep Sabbath days or ancient feasts, or to profess himself at all to be a Jew. And in the day of the king's birth every month they were brought by bitter constraint to eat of the sacrifice. And when the feast of Bacchus was kept, the Jews were compelled to go in procession to Bacchus carrying ivy. Moreover, there went out a decree to the neighbor cities of the heathen by the suggestion of Ptolemy against the Jews, that they should observe the same fashions and be partakers of their sacrifices, and whosoever would not conform themselves to the matters of the Gentiles should be put to death. Then might a man have seen the present misery." All right, so with that, I'm gonna let this video play. I'll be back.
Since ancient Greece, there have been efforts to control human populations via reproduction, retaining some traits and removing others. But in the 19th century, the discovery of evolution and genetics inspired a new scientific movement dedicated to this endeavor. In 1883, British scientist Sir Francis Galton named this idea eugenics, drawing from the Greek word for "to be well born." This wave of modern eugenicists included prominent scientists and progressive reformers who believed they could improve society by ensuring that only desirable traits were passed down. However, their definition of what traits were and were not desirable was largely determined by the prejudices of their era. Entire categories of people were considered unfit for reproduction, including immigrants, people of color, and people with disabilities. Meanwhile, as founder of the American Birth Control League, which later became Planned Parenthood, Margaret Sanger was no doubt a controversial figure with disturbing views on eugenics, race, and population control. While some argue she even wanted to exterminate the black race, others are trying to erase that part of her past.
The Mike Wallace interview. In the eyes of some, Margaret Sanger has been a heroine. In the eyes of others, she's been a destructive force.
In her own words, Sanger pushed for a society that limited births to those she deemed fit to have children.
I think the greatest sin in the world is bringing children into the world that have disease from their parents, that have no chance in the world to be a human being, practically. Delinquents, prisoners, all sorts of things just marked when they're born.
In 1916, Sanger opened the country's first birth control clinic. As a member of the American Eugenics Society, she advocated improving the genetic composition of humans through controlled reproduction of different races and classes. She often wrote about the issue in the journal she founded, called the Birth Control Review. In 1919, writing,
I personally believe in the sterilization of the feeble-minded, the insane, and the syphilitic. The most urgent problem today is how to limit and discourage the over-fertility of the mentally and physically defective.
Many point to a 1923 New York Times interview as proof of Sanger's racist motives, in which she referred to people as weeds, saying,
It means the release and cultivation of the better racial elements in our society and the gradual suppression, elimination, and eventual extirpation of defective stocks, those human weeds which threaten the blooming of the finest flowers of American civilization.
Hayden Ludwig, an investigative researcher, has extensively studied Sanger's life and writings.
She talked about the need for race betterment through controlling these weeds, basically undesirable people.
In 1939, after opening another clinic in Harlem, the birth control activist launched the Negro Project, an initiative supported by black leaders, such as civil rights activist W.E.B. Du Bois. Critics claim the program used the pretense of better health and family planning for poor blacks in the South as an attempt to limit the black race. Ludwig says some on the left grapple with Sanger's past and how to interpret her legacy.
They know when she writes about human weeds, they know that it's repulsive. They know it's disgusting. The left will never abandon Margaret Sanger because if they do, she's the foundation of so many of their views.
Sanger once shared her vision for a preferred race at a women's branch of the Ku Klux Klan, writing in her autobiography,
Always, to me, any aroused group was a good group.
Despite those views, liberals praise Sanger's work while ignoring her history.
I admire Margaret Sanger enormously. Her courage, her tenacity, her vision. I am really in awe of her.
Ryan Baumberger, founder of the Radiance Foundation, says abortion proponents are working to clean up Sanger's past and what she stood for.
They have to reinvent her every time they talk about her in order to justify their celebration of her.
Former Planned Parenthood director Abby Johnson says those inside the abortion industry are trained to overlook Sanger's racist views.
They give you an answer like, well, I mean, yes, Margaret Sanger was a racist, but everybody was a racist back then. You accept it because she is your hero, and she has to be your hero. You cannot question Planned Parenthood.
In 1997, Stephen Mosher of the Population Research Institute wrote about the push to repackage Margaret Sanger in the Wall Street Journal.
The reason I call it the repackaging of Margaret Sanger is because after the Nazi regime destroyed the legitimacy of eugenics forever. They then went back and said, oh, she was just an early feminist. She was just an early supporter of family planning. No, she wasn't. No, she was a supporter of giving IQ tests to people. She was in favor of using those IQ tests to determine who should be sterilized and who should have children.
Correct. In 1942, Margaret Sanger's American Birth Control League became Planned Parenthood, which has moved to fulfill its founders' goals, helped greatly by the Supreme Court decision in Roe v. Wade.
Under the veil of secrecy and deception, 60+ million babies have not been born because they were aborted legally since '73. 1/3 of that population belong to the African American community.
A frightening and telling number, given blacks make up only 13% of the U.S. population. Dan Gaynor of the Media Research Center says that Sanger's true mission remains alive and well throughout today's abortion industry.
Look at the maps. See where the abortion facilities are. They are near places where people are marginalized, people are poor, people are minority, and that's their target market.
On now to other stories. The American Census Bureau has released the demographic data showing how the U.S. has changed over the past decade. It is the most detailed account of the demographic changes in the country since the year 2010. U.S. Census data release shows that the United States is an increasingly diverse country, as there have been significant increases in the number of people who identify as multiracial, Hispanic, and Asian. These categories have driven much of the population growth between 2010 and 2020. The multiracial population has changed considerably since 2010. It was measured at 9 million people in 2010 and is now 33.8 million people in 2020, which is a 276% increase. The Hispanic or Latino population, which includes people of any race, was 62.1 million in 2020. The Hispanic or Latino population grew 23%, while the population that was not of Hispanic or Latino origin grew 4.3% since 2020. The white population remains the largest race of ethnicity group in the United States, with 204.3 million people identifying as white alone, but its share of the overall population is declining. The white alone population decreased by 8.6% since 2010.
And right now, white people are really frightened. If you don't understand the destruction of Planned Parenthood offices, and you don't understand the wall that we're going to build on the southern border of the United States, you haven't read the book, The Birth Dearth by Ben Wattenberg. Ben Wattenberg was a brilliant Jewish man who was a member of the American Enterprise Institute, and he wrote a book, the first paragraph of which says, "The main problem confronting the United States today is there aren't enough white babies being born in this country." He was an advisor to presidents of the United States. He wrote the book in 1987. He says if we don't change this and change it rapidly, white people will lose their numerical majority in this country, and this will no longer be a white man's land. Now, I'm not misrepresenting this. I'm telling you almost exactly what he says. He says there are 3 things we can do to solve this. Number 1, we could pay women to have babies, as they have been doing in Western European nations for years. Then he says, and these are his words, not mine, unfortunately, we would have to pay women of all colors to have babies, so we don't want to do that. He says the second thing we could do is increase the number of legal immigrants that are allowed into this country every year. Then once again he says, unfortunately, the vast majority of those wanting to come to this country today are people of color, so we don't want to do that. The third thing he says, and white women had better pay attention to this, 60% of the fetuses that are aborted every year are white. If we could keep that 60% alive, that would solve our birth dearth. Does that sound like racism to you?
Can you talk a little bit about the trauma associated with?
The trauma associated with it?
Yeah.
One of the main traumas is it tells white people that they are superior because of the lack of melanin in their skin. And then they find out suddenly that we've got a black president. That's traumatic. That's where the trauma is. Living a lie, finding out the truth, is traumatic.
Right. Living a lie and finding out the truth is traumatic. And the truth punch these folk dead in their face. They dying more than they being born. Now notice, Miss Lady said dude wrote the book in the 80s. The newscast said that the census got taken in 2010, so it's like a first time thing in 2010. that the population of so-called whites have been on the decline. So the numbers ain't adding up on that off top. So that means they've been going down, but it's just now to the point to where they got to do something about it. If they don't do something about it, then they assed out. But the crazy part about all of this is I keep hearing people speak about this the new world, and we need to let go of the old, and change this and change that. But the old ways are still in play today, right? All the things that's written about servitude in the Constitution is still there. The 3/5 of a human being is still there, right? The eugenics idea is still here, right? And it's to the point to where now you got Israelites that don't know no damn better, that's rooting for the destruction of their own people. And like I said before, in prior videos, by you not understanding that you rooting for the destruction of your own people, you actually adding on to it, right? You are the cause of the destruction of your people, right? So, anywho, with that, let me go to the book of Obadiah, verse 6. It says, "How are the things of Esau searched out? How are his hidden things sought up?" Like she said, it's traumatic for Esau to hear the truth about himself, right? Especially in modern generations that really don't know anything about their past. They just know they living pretty all right, and they wondering why we keep complaining about things because of how this world is presented today. It's traumatic to them when they hear certain things. A lot of these people refuse to believe it, even though it's proof out there. It's just like Israelites, so-called blacks, so-called Hispanics, so-called Native Americans. The truth is traumatizing to them, and it's to the point to where they refuse to believe it because it sounds so far-fetched. It sounds so crazy that a nation of people would hate you strictly because it's in them to hate you, and that they would go through such great lengths to destroy you. That sounds crazy to the average individual, but it's the truth, right? We just ran down the history of Planned Parenthood. It goes beyond Planned Parenthood. It goes all the way back to back, all the way back. Like Ms. Lady said, it go back to Greece. And like the Bible said, go back to Egypt. We've always had heathens try to kill us off, man. They hate us because they ain't us, right? And them just facts, man. But this particular devil, man, let me go to the book of Ezekiel, chapter 35 and verse 5. It says, "Because thou hast had a perpetual hatred." The word perpetual meaning it never ends. It's going to always be there. And this particular passage is speaking about Esau, Edom. Right? It says, "And has shed the blood of the children of Israel by the force of the sword in the time of their calamity, in the time that their iniquity had an end. Therefore, as I live, saith Yahweh Power, I will prepare thee unto blood, and blood shall pursue thee. Since thou hast not hated blood, even blood shall pursue thee. Thus will I make Mount Seir most desolate, and cut off from it him that passeth out, and him that returneth." The numbers have no choice but to dwindle down, and it's going to dwindle all the way down to zero, right? Because eventually there will be no more Edomites. There'll be a thing of the past, right? And that's the end of that when it comes to, Esau, Edom. All right, but like I said, man, all of this is the Most High Yahweh Bashim Yahweh Shah bringing judgment on these folks, man, because they've been bamming us up for so long. Notice what I read in 2 Maccabees. That's Greece. Right, we can go to the book of Exodus, and we can see Egypt. All right, you can go to what is it, Revelation chapter 12, and you'll see Rome. Right, and it ain't in the book of Matthews. Right, it's always been that way. Always been that way. But the particular devil that really has a passion for it, that's Esau. Esau Edom, man. All right, so at the end of the day, the Most High said these curses gonna fall on you, and you cannot outrun it. Right? It ain't a spell you can cast that's gonna get you out of this. You can't escape to the moon. You can't escape into space. You can't dig your way underneath it. There's nowhere to run and nowhere to hide. And your time is up. And you have been found wanting. So you just gotta deal with it, man. It is what it is. Just like we had to deal with it. Just like we still gotta deal with it to today. Right? Our fathers have sinned, and we have borne their iniquity. So y'all gotta bear or born y'all father's iniquities, or y'all gotta carry y'all father's iniquities, like it's spoken of in Isaiah chapter 14. Right? So with that, Yahweh Shema Sharatazah. These precepts in this video are edifying. Call Haloyim Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahweh Shai Bahashem Harakakodash Shalom Yashalom.